Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone. Welcome to today's event. Slight apologies for the little delay. Obviously, there's technical issues we had to resolve. So first of all, let me welcome everybody and welcome our guests as well. We've got Dr. Saif. Assalamu alaikum. And Maulana Imran from Leytonstone Masjid. Assalamu alaikum. So he may be mute on there, but I think he can certainly hear us. This event is organised by Waltham Forest and North London Muslim Parents Association. We are an affiliate to Waltham Forest Council of Mosques. And today we've got an imam, a very important guest, obviously from Leytonstone Masjid, to talk a bit about the Fiqh of Ramadan. Just before we go into some of the introductions and sort of admin, let me just remind ourselves, Ramadan is the month of the Quran. It is a month, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, in the translation, the month of Ramadan in which was revealed the Quran, a guidance for mankind and clear proofs for the guidance and criterion between right and wrong. We also know it's the month where the doors of Jannah and Allah's mercy are open, and the doors of hellfire and Allah's wrath are closed. The shayateen are chained, and a month to help build our taqwa, our closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know very clearly in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the translation, O you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you, as it was prescribed for those before you, that you may acquire taqwa. And another example of Umar bin Abdul Aziz radiallahu anhu once said that taqwa is not by fasting the day and not by praying the night, and it's not by mixing between the two of them, but taqwa is leaving what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made haram, and by doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made fard. After one has done this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide good things for that person. So this is the backdrop to today's event. Just before we do formal introductions, worth a reminder, if you have any questions or if you have any comments that you want to make, please use the chat facility or raise your virtual hand. And these questions, inshallah, will be taken at the end of each session. And it is a unique event because it's a live event, not only in terms of the Zoom community, but it's also a live event in the masjid. So Maulana Imran is participating with a live audience. So any questions that we have from the live audience, we will go through the imam, inshallah. So, Maulana Imran, let me start with yourself first, and also Dr. Saif. Fiqh of Ramadan, all the rules around participating in this blessed month, is to do with the health, is to do with our ibadat. But some questions that have been raised, who's excused from fasting? How does fasting impact me if I'm traveling? Should children fast while at school or undertaking exams? And with COVID, unfortunately, how will COVID impact me? Perhaps these are some of the questions that can be tackled both by the Maulana and Dr. Saif. So let me start with Maulana Imran. Maulana Imran, are you okay? Are you able to?
We'll start with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone listening at home and through the Zoom community as well, of Waltham Forest Parents Association. And alhamdulillah, we're ready to start now in terms of the Fiqh of Fasting session. And alhamdulillah, I could see a number of people and families and youngsters, as well as brothers and sisters on the Zoom community, as well as here in the masjid. So alhamdulillah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this session a fruitful session. So the Fiqh of Fasting, we've heard much about the virtues of fasting, and we'll go over one or two hadiths of the Fiqh of Fasting as well, or the virtues of fasting. First of all, as we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made fasting farz on us. And the verse of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, kutiba alaykum as-siyam, kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. So we understand from this verse of the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not just made fasting for this ummah, it was prescribed for the ummah before as well, the nations before as well. Other nations were fasting as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us fasting, and there's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fasting for a very long time, many a times as well. And it's explained to children that fasting is so that we feel how those people who are not fortunate enough, that don't have enough food, or who are poor, so that we feel their hunger. But that's not the reality. The Quran speaks itself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That fasting is there. The reason of fasting is so I just forgot to share the screen there. Okay, so fasting is not just the main primary reason for fasting is so that we develop consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We develop taqwa. Yeah, we develop taqwa and consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's awareness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. This is the main reason of fasting. And how this is done, one way to understand it is that something which is really, really important for us, right, which is drinking and eating. Right? We refrain from that simply during the day, during the time of fasting. And every time we want to eat or every time we want to drink, we think to ourselves that I can't do this because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told me not to. This repetitive thought, I want to eat, I want to drink, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I can't do it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told me not to, that for the whole month of Ramadan will allow us to increase our awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, increase our consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which should help us out of the month of Ramadan, that we are constantly thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we are constantly conscious about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We want to, obviously out of Ramadan a person can eat and he can sleep, but there are things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us to refrain from. And every time a person wants to do something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to refrain from, the thoughts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should come into our mind, which should stop us from doing those actions. So, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Now, in terms of preparation for the month of Ramadan, so we need to prepare for the month of Ramadan. Now, there are a number of ways that a person can prepare for the month of Ramadan. A few are listed over here. So first of all, repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, raise our hands in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, apologize to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, confess to all of our sins, and say, oh Allah, oh Allah, forgive me now. Oh Allah, please forgive me now. Sincerely repent. And say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, all the sins that I am doing, and mention those sins in your thoughts, in your speaking. Oh Allah, I am indulged in this sin. I am indulged in this sin. This is the sins I am doing, and I do this so often, etc. So put that in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, put that in front of yourself, and apologize to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sincerely repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we are purified for the month of Ramadan. So with this in mind, a person will be able to enter into the month of Ramadan in a better situation, with that thought in mind that these are things that I've confessed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I have said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I'm not going to do this. So this is a way of preparing for Ramadan, making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Try to get rid of those things that distract you before Ramadan. Yeah. So those things that distract us in the month of Ramadan. So for example, our phones. If I were to say that, get rid of our phones, that would be near enough impossible. Going back to that aspect, that prepare yourself for Ramadan in a way that you know that you are going to do these certain things. If a person says that, oh, this such and such sheikh, alim, scholar, allama, pious person was able to recite 15 juz of Quran in a day in the month of Ramadan, I will do this as well. Realistically, practically, can we do it? Maybe not. And if we put that on ourselves and we do it on one day, definitely we will buckle the second day, and then the third day and the fourth day will just become void of reciting the Quran, or very minimum. So the hadith of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, whatever actions that we do, we should do with consistency. Even if it's 2 rak'ah nafil salah every day with consistency. Even if it is 1 page of Quran consistently. Obviously, we want to do a little bit more. We need to push ourselves. A bit like when you're exercising. A person that exercises, he exercises for 5 minutes and he starts to huff and puff. And then the next day he pushes himself to do 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes. So we have to continuously push ourselves. But to get rid of those things which distract us. So I know that, and we know that we can't get rid of the phones. But maybe delete those apps that we constantly kind of flick through, the news apps, yeah, or maybe social media apps. Put a time on there, or any of those type of apps that really kind of is draining our time, right? Or put some kind of parameters that these are the times I'm not going to be using my phone. So get rid of those things that distract us in the month of Ramadan. Computer. I won't go into my computer. I won't sit here. I won't go there. I won't go to this place, and etc. Now, learn the rulings about fasting, which we're doing, inshallah. Fast some of the month of Sha'ban. So it's important to fast some of the days of Sha'ban as well. Now we can't fast, because it's also important that we prepare ourselves for the month of Ramadan. So generally speaking, to fast the 28th and 29th of Sha'ban, we shouldn't do. We should refrain from fasting the 28th and the 29th of Sha'ban in preparation for the month of Ramadan. Read lots of Quran, so we could start reciting Quran now to get into the habit. That ideally we should have done that in the month of Sha'ban, from the beginning of the month of Sha'ban. And as I mentioned in the previous Jumu'ah bayans as well, that these are certain things that we want to start doing in the month of Sha'ban. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam would fast excessively in the month of Sha'ban. This was one of the months according to the Islamic calendar that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam would fast the most. Try to set yourself a timetable and a resolution for Ramadan. So timetables are very, very important, and to stick to that timetable, to pinpoint every moment of the day, every minute, every half an hour, every second of the day. What am I going to do? And bearing in mind, dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very, very important. So where we're looking at the hours and the half an hours and the mornings and the afternoons, it's important to also look at every single minute. What am I doing minute by minute? Yeah, walking, whilst I'm sitting, whilst I'm commuting to work, whilst I'm waiting. What should I be doing? I should be engaging myself in dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A few of the virtues of fasting, we won't go through all of them. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, whoever fasts in Ramadan with firm belief and with hope of gaining reward, his previous sins will be forgiven. Yeah? So whoever fasts in the month of Ramadan with the hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and firm belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of gaining reward, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive his sins. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, in paradise there is a gate which is called Rayyan, through which only the people who fast would enter on the day of resurrection. No one else would enter along with them. It would be announced, where are the people who fast that they should be admitted into? Now, the fasting people. So obviously in the month of Ramadan, everyone fasts. But there's a specific door for those people who fast, the specific door of Jannah. And those people who fast. So this is not just for the month of Ramadan. Throughout the year as well, we should try and fast as much as possible. And the person that fasts more, then obviously he is more eligible for this door. And the month of Ramadan as well, depending on how we do the month of Ramadan, how we fast. In the next slide, I'm going to cover the different stages of our fast, or the different categories of our fast. So these are certain virtues of fasting. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I don't want to go too much into the virtues. Obviously, there are numerous virtues and there are numerous ways of encouragement in terms of the month of Ramadan and fasting. But this is more for the fiqh of fasting. Now, degrees of fasting. So this is something interesting and important, that minimal level of fasting is what? To not eat or drink through the day. That simple minimum form of fasting, not to eat or drink through the day. And the fast will be accepted. The Sawm will be accepted. The Roza will be accepted. Yeah. In terms of reward and how you want to develop لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, that fasting is for, to develop taqwa. What we need to do for that is a bit more than the minimum level, which is to refrain from eating and drinking and sexual intimacy with our spouses. The higher level is preventing the eyes, ears, tongue and other organs from the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one is to refrain from eating and drinking. The next thing is to ensure that we refrain from sins. Yeah? Lowering our gazes, making sure that we control our tongues, making sure that we control our ears, what we're listening to, making sure what we are doing, you know, how we're utilizing our time, how we're managing our time, and that our time is only consumed by the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, bearing in mind, remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't mean that we are constantly reciting Quran, or we are constantly in salah, or that we are constantly in any form of ibadah. In fact, even sitting and pondering over the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also an act of ibadah. Sitting and doing dhikr, without a doubt, is an act of ibadah and is in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our Ramadan should be in full ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is that higher level, yeah? Away from the minimum level, higher level. The elite level, where we really feel the essence of Ramadan, the essence of fasting, is where we connect our hearts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where we connect our hearts, our minds with our ibadah, and we take away ourselves from the dunya. Yeah? So a person, is constantly thinking about work, constantly thinking about purchasing, constantly thinking about selling, constantly thinking about going on holiday, yeah, and all. So what is the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that should be our primary focus. It should also be our primary thought as well. Yeah? So whatever's primary has to happen more so than the secondary. Now the secondary is to live a life in this dunya. But to live a life in this dunya, we are only doing to be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whatever is necessary to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that amount is sufficient. And that amount is important. That amount is halal. Anything beyond that is not necessary. It's not necessary and is taking us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if I need £100 to live my day in which I can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is necessary, that is halal. And that doesn't take me away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I'm doing something to earn £200, right, that is actually taking me away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the way I'm saying it is as though, it's quite alien to us. That we never do this. If we look back at the lives of the Sahaba, this is what they had. They had sufficient to live that particular day. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make over here is that the minimum level of fasting is, just to refrain from those things that break our fast. Higher level is to ensure that we refrain from sins, and that next level is one step ahead, which is to connect our thoughts and our minds with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us this ability. Otherwise, the hadith of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where it is said that a person fasts and he gets nothing except for staying hungry and thirsty. A person fasts, but he gets nothing except for staying hungry and thirsty through the day. There's no reward for him. Yeah? He's been absolved of his, fard, and that's it. Now, in terms of the fiqh of fasting, this is the core part. So, first of all, is the definition. The definition of fasting is to refrain, to abstain. The technical, where we're looking at in terms of the fasting of the month of Ramadan, to refrain from eating and drinking and sexual intercourse during daylight hours from Subh Sadiq till sunset with intention. So that is what the definition of fasting is. Subh Sadiq is where Fajr time begins, and that is the time when we finish our suhoor. And it's also important to look at many calendars of the masjids. For example, if Subh Sadiq, if I look at the timetable over here right now, on our timetable it says 4:38. Subh Sadiq is 4:38. That is the time when Fajr time begins. So if this was a day of Ramadan, 4:38 should be the day, the moment, the time when I last eat. I can't eat anything or drink anything after 4:38. If we look at the calendar, it'd probably say that Sahri ends or Suhoor ends at 4:28. So 4:28 to 4:38, there's a 10-minute period there. And a lot of the calendars have this grace period, or have this period where, just to make sure that no one elapses and make sure that everyone gets their fast. So at 4:28, ideally you should stop eating and drinking and prepare yourself. But if someone was to continue eating until 4:35, his fast will still be okay, because it's actually 4:38, which is Subh Sadiq. But his grace period that is given is to ensure that everyone is within a good time frame, and making sure that no one oversleeps, or to make sure that their fast is going to go well. So the fast starts from the early morning, Subh Sadiq, to the sunset of that day. There are different types of fast. Obviously, the fast of Ramadan is farz. That's necessary. We have to keep. There are wajib fasts as well, something that you vow on yourself, that I will definitely keep this particular type of fast, or this time I'll keep a fast for this many days. There are the sunnah fasts, which Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam kept on Monday and Thursday. Then the 13, 14, 15th of the month as well. These are sunnah. You could also classify them as mustahab as well. There are certain other fasts throughout the year, the fast of Ashura, the fast of Dhul Hijjah, and there are certain fasts which we're not allowed to keep, or certain times which we're not allowed to keep. So can you imagine that there's farz fast, wajib fast, sunnah fast, mustahab fast, and there's also a fast which becomes haram to do. Yeah? And they are 5 days like that. The 2 Eids and the Ayyam al-Tashriq, the 11th, 12th, and the 13th of the Dhul Hijjah. So these are days that a person is not allowed to fast, even if a person intended to fast and he wants to gain reward. It's not allowed. In fact, it's a sin to fast on that day. So it's a sin to fast on Eid day. If someone was so much into the realm of Ramadan and really enjoyed fasting and getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it was that type of elite faster, elite person that was fasting, really connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he decided to fast on Eid day, it's not allowed, it's impermissible to fast on Eid day. Simply because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that is a day that a person should not fast, and that is a day a person should eat. Yeah. So it's important to understand this, that a person is not allowed to fast on those on those particular days. There are farz fast, wajib fast, and sunnah fast. Conditions of the fast. So obligation. So fasting is obligatory on a person if they fulfill the following criteria. They are Muslim, they are accountable, in other words, they are mature and baligh, past the age of puberty, and lastly, they are able to fast and do not have a valid exemption. So these 3 things, then a person has to fast. The first of all, they are Muslim. Fasting is not on non-Muslims. A person that believes in Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam must fast. A person that does not believe, we have someone that comes into our masjid over here who's saying that he wants to accept Islam, but he's not ready yet. He just wants to come and observe Salah. He has a Quran, he recites the Quran. He's not accepted Islam. Should he fast? Does he need to fast? He doesn't have to fast. Fasting is not on him because he has not accepted Islam. So to be a Muslim, then to be of that age of maturity, puberty, have started puberty, so fasting becomes farz. This year's fast, they're not as long. Previous 2-3 years fast, they were really long. And the question would arise that, the fast are 18 hours. And my son is 13 years old. Does he have to fast? Yes, he does have to fast. If he's mature, if he's become baligh, he may seem small. He may seem very young, weak, and as many parents say, he's really skinny. If he's going to fast, he's going to become even more skinny. But the reality is that he has to fast. Right? So, or my daughter, she's 14. She's experiencing her periods, and that does she have to fast? Yes, she has to fast. Isha Salah is really late in terms of Isha in the summer months. It's at 10:30 beginning time that she has to offer her Isha Salah. Yes, she has to offer her Isha Salah. It may affect her period cycles and etc. She's baligh, she's mature, she has to fast. Obviously, if she doesn't fast, she will be accountable for that. She will be sinful for that, and she will have to do qada of those fasts. Certain situations where a person is excused for not fasting in the month of Ramadan. So whoever among you is ill, so this is a verse after Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. The verse after the ayyaman ma'adudat faman kana minkum maridan aw ala safarin fa'iddatun min ayyamin ukhra. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever among you is ill or on a journey, then the same number of days at another time a person has to make up the fast. Those who are not capable should pay the fidya, which is to feed a poor person. So if a person is traveling, he is excused from fasting if he's not able to fast. But if a person is able to travel and fast, then it's better for him to fast. If a person is not well, then he can refrain from fasting. So long as the illness is such that it's going to become even more difficult, it's going to increase that illness, then he should refrain from fasting. If a person has a runny nose, if a person has a headache, maybe a backache or something, or a person knows, every individual knows themselves that today if I fast, it's going to become even more difficult, or I'm going to become even more ill, then a person can not fast and is excused from fasting, but he has to make up those days after. So those who have temporary excuses from fasting in Ramadan, so temporarily sick person, a traveler, menstruating women and women in child or postnatal bleeding, the pregnant woman and breastfeeding women, if there is a fear of the weakness and harm to the mother or child. So these are certain situations where a person is exempted from fasting. So if a woman is breastfeeding and she knows from her situation, and she's consulted her doctors or her midwife, and the midwife has also said, you're at this time of your pregnancy, or you're at this time of your breastfeeding, that if you were to fast and the fast is really long, it's quite likely so that your child may suffer because not enough milk will be produced, or your child in your womb will suffer. So obviously this is something that the individual, as well as a doctor and a midwife, would need to consult. You'd need to consult. However, if that is the case, then there is an opportunity there, or there is a situation there where a person could not fast, does not need to fast, and must keep those fasts after. Again, an extremely weak and an incapable person, or temporarily ill or sick person. Obviously, COVID time right now. Allah protect all of us. But sometimes when, many a times when COVID has struck, a person becomes really ill, is hospitalized, is really weak, even after COVID, or after recovering from COVID, those that are suffering long COVID, really weak, difficulty in breathing, a little walk, and they start breathing heavily. In this case as well, a person is exempted from fasting if he feels that the fast will increase his illness or make it even more difficult for him. Every individual has to look at his own situation and definitely consult with the doctor. Again, where a person is permitted not to fast, a woman experiencing the monthly haze or in a state of nifas, as long as the state of haze or nifas remains, it will not be permissible for such a woman to fast. A person accepts Islam during the day. If a person accepts Islam during the day, does he have to fast? No, he doesn't have to fast, because he wasn't a Muslim, or Islam was not, he was not mukallaf, he was not, fasting was not there for him at the beginning of the day. A person reaches the age of puberty during the day, then does he have to fast? He doesn't have to fast. What he should do ideally is something called imsak, which is to refrain from eating and adopt the same thing what the fasting people are doing, and which is to not eat until sunset of that day. The conditions of the fast, the validity. So intention, having the understanding and to acknowledge that one will fast, to be made the previous night before Fajr, yet after Maghrib. So when does a person have to intend to fast? Now, the intention doesn't have to happen verbally. A person can even wake up for suhoor, and that would suffice for an intention, simply because no one ever wakes up early in the morning at 3 o'clock to eat. The fact that a person has actually woken up at 3 o'clock to have something to eat is a clear intention of him wanting to fast the next day. Staying away from those that break the fast from dawn till sunset, and also to be free from menstruation and postnatal bleeding. The conditions of the fast. Intention must be made for each day, does not have to be verbal, can be made from the night until Islamic midday. And this is what we're going to go through. Now, there is a difference of opinion here, and this is for the Hanafi, according to the Hanafi school of thought. In terms of intention, when can a person when can a person make the intention? So intention has to be done from night, and the earliest a person could do it is after Maghrib. Yeah, after Maghrib, that I want to fast the next day, and he could make this intention. This intention can happen all the way up to the Islamic midday. Yeah, Dhahwatul Kubra. So must be made for each day, and I'm going to explain that as well. Does not have to be verbal, can be made from the night until the Islamic midday. Now, what is the Islamic midday? So if we look over here, Subh Sadiq, dawn, 4 a.m. Yeah, if dawn, Subh Sadiq is 4 a.m. What does that mean? That if a person wanted to read Fajr, he can start reading Fajr after 4 a.m., not before 4 a.m. Before 4 a.m., what salah should a person be doing? Tahajjud, yeah? A person should be doing tahajjud prayer. After 4 a.m., can a person do tahajjud? No. So 4 a.m. is Subh Sadiq, right? And that is effectively the time when Subh finishes as well. Now, iftar is at 9 p.m. Yeah. So how many hours is that in total? That's 17 hours. That is 17 hours of the full day. Divide that by 2, which is 8.5. Yeah, 8.5. Right? Now, what is 8.5 from 4 a.m.? That equals to be 12:30. So the Islamic midday is 12:30. So a person can intend to fast until 12:30. He could delay the intention of fasting until 12:30 for his Ramadan fast. Right? Providing a person hasn't done any of those things which nullify the fast, like eating, drinking, or engaging in intimate relationships, yeah, before 12:30. And there's a reason where this leeway happens to, be good and effective if a person has a dentist appointment. For example, if a person has a dentist appointment, ideally we should manage ourselves that all appointments should happen after the month of Ramadan or before the month of Ramadan, and clear our month of Ramadan. If it's really necessary and a person can't have any appointments and there's a 6 months wait and it's really necessary, a toothache and it's really paining, a tooth needs to be taken out, whatnot, so then a person can have, it's fine to have the appointment in the month of Ramadan. And now to manage this, one way is that simply do not fast that day. Because when you have your, dentist appointment, it's likely that substance goes down and, you drink something or tricklets of water go down to your throat and your fast is broken. So one is to not keep the fast rather than keep the fast and then break the fast. And that way, what would happen is that you'd have to do qada of the fast. If you're fasting and you went to the dentist and water went down, yeah, whilst the teeth are being cleaned, water went down, the fast broke. Now, qada is necessary, not kaffara. So there's a difference which I will explain as well. What is qada and what is kaffara? Qada simply means to make up the fast after the month of Ramadan. Now, in this situation where the midday intention becomes effective, is that if a person has an appointment before 12:30, for example, at 10 o'clock, right? So he doesn't start fasting and he doesn't intend to, he doesn't make the intention of fasting. He goes to the dentist appointment, and so long as nothing happened that nullifies the fast, like for example, water going down or having to sip water or having to take medicine, then he could delay that intention up until after the appointment. Appointment was at 9:30, appointment finished at 10:30, nothing happened that nullifies the fast, right? He hasn't drank anything, he didn't take any medicine, nothing went down his throat, and he's still able to make intention for that fast up until 12:30. Right? So that way, a person doesn't break the fast, and a person, is not in a situation where he hasn't kept the fast as well, and he actually keeps the fast and the appointment is done as well. This is where this happens to be effective for us. So this is in terms of the niyyah intention. So the intention starts at Subh Sadiq, or the fast starts at Subh Sadiq. A person can delay the intention up until midday, and I've shown how the midday can be calculated from dawn to sunset, the hours, divide that by 2, and Dhahwatul Kubra, or the midday, is halfway through that day, and a person can delay the intention effectively until halfway, providing he hasn't done anything, or he hasn't done anything that nullifies the fast. Now, in terms of suhoor, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, have suhoor, for verily in suhoor there is blessing. There is blessing in suhoor. So a person may feel strong, may feel really energetic, and for that I don't really need to have a suhoor. It's not need basis, it's not needs based. It's more a blessing. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, have suhoor because there is blessing, there is virtue in having suhoor. And without a doubt, it does help a person a fasting person. It's an opportunity to wake up and have something to eat, and also be awake at that time where a person can be doing tahajjud prayer. So, do tahajjud and also eat something. So this, helps in both ways. Having something to eat, have something light to eat that would get through the day. Obviously, we're going to have a dietitian, a doctor and a dietitian that's going to be coming on much later, and you'll be able to hear his guidance as well in terms of dietary and medical things that are important for whilst we're fasting. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, suhoor is a blessed meal, so do not abandon it, even if you only take a sip of water. Verily Allah and His angels send blessing upon those who have suhoor. To delay the suhoor, close near the time of Subh Sadiq is mustahab. If someone fasted without suhoor, it would be valid, but they would have missed the reward and blessing of the sunnah of suhoor. So it's important in the month of Ramadan, we try and exercise as much as we can in terms of the sunnah and the mustahab acts of the Sharia and Islam. So suhoor is sunnah, so we should really try and do suhoor, even if it's at such a time where we want to sleep, because we want to go to work the next day. But manage ourselves, sleep early after Taraweeh, wake up for suhoor, do tahajjud, do fajr. And that's why in the masajid as well, in all the masajid, fajr is literally at its pretty much at its earliest point. Right? We don't delay fajr. Generally, in our masjid, our fajr is much later, and the reason why it's much later is so that more people are there and people wake up for fajr and come to the masjid for fajr. In Ramadan, however, we do it the other way around. We do it the earliest because we know that everyone is awake for suhoor. So manage our time, and if we have to then sleep after fajr, is even better to sleep after sunrise, once we've done the other nafil prayer, which is ishraq. Now, in terms of actions that invalidate and do not invalidate the fast, so there are a few categories in that. The action of one who is fasting is divided into 4 categories. So those actions that require a qadha and a kafara. Qadha is to make up one after. If you miss one fast, you have to make it up after. Kafara is a penalty. And kafara is a penalty, which means that there's a penalty for the way you have broken the fast. So sometimes a person, in his negligence and in his ignorance, he breaks his fast in such a way that it requires a penalty. And the penalty is to fast 60 consecutive days. 60 consecutive days. Right? And it's not as simple that if water went down your throat, then you have to do qadha and kafara. It's if a person there's certain times when this happens, and we're going to go through that. So there's certain actions which require qadha and kafara. What is kafara? Kafara is to fast 60 consecutive days. Right? And so we have to manage it in a way where Eid does not come and Ramadan does not come. So it's got to be clear 60 days. Obviously for women who experience their menstrual cycles, there's no way that they can do it 60 consecutives, because it's very systematic in the month, in every month and that. So they could pretty much do it anytime, but their consecutiveness should not be broken by Ramadan or Eid. Point number 2, or category number 2, those actions that require a qadha only. There's certain actions that happen whilst we're fasting that require a qadha only. Number 3, those actions that require nothing yet are disliked. Yeah, certain things that we do in the month of Ramadan where our fast is still intact, but it's disliked to do. Yeah? And it obviously diminishes the reward of the fast. Those actions that require nothing are not disliked as well. There's always been this kind of confusion that, does this break my fast? And for some reason, people think that even applying oil on your hair, it breaks your fast. It doesn't break your fast. To have a shower, it doesn't break the fast. So it's important to try and go through a few of those things as well. For some reason, culturally or whatever, they've been become prevalent that these things break the fast, and people get into a confusion, and then they go and actually break their fast, and that becomes a major problem. So sometimes thinking something breaks the fast, right? Like for example, a person thinks that if I apply oil to my hair, it will break my fast. Or if I have a shower, because I've cooled down, it will break my fast. If a person thinks that, and then he actually goes and breaks his fast, so he thought that doing that action broke my fast, so I'm not fasting now, and then he goes and eats. So he's intentionally went and eaten or drank something. So now what will happen is that he will have to do qada and kafara. Qada and kafara, because it's compound ignorance. It's compound ignorance. So it's important to know what actually breaks the fast and what doesn't break the fast. Okay. Those actions that require qada and kafara are very few, which is intentionally eating something of nutritional value, i.e. something normally eaten, or for medical purposes, right? And it's intentionally done. Yeah? Intentionally, someone, eats something, or for medical purposes as well, intentionally does it without a need. Right? So, for example, a person feels that having a paracetamol doesn't matter; it's only small, and with a little bit of water, it's fine. That will break the fast, yeah, because that was done intentionally without any reason. Likewise, intentionally drinking something of nutritional value or for medicinal purposes. Again, if it's medicinal purposes, drinking or consuming something without a reason. Sometimes a person becomes so ill and frail that he has to have, the medicine. Like, for example, asthma. Asthma pumps do break fast, and he'll make a qada necessary, not a kafara. Yeah, not kafara. So if a person is fasting and he intentionally has a couple of puffs of his asthma pump, it will break the fast, but there's no kafara to it. But if he feels that he doesn't need to have it, but yet he's having it as a normal dose, morning, afternoon, and evening, that will break the fast, and there will be kafara as well. If any of the three above were done out of forgetfulness of the fast does not break. Right? Now, this is something important to understand as well. As Ramadan kicks in, we're about our normal day, and every day seems normal, especially the first few days. So a person, for example, goes to work on Tuesday or Wednesday, gets to work and goes into the kitchen area of the workplace, and everyone's having a cup of coffee, and he decides to make himself a cup of coffee, and he sits down at his desk and has a full cup of coffee, forgetting that he is fasting. That will not break the fast. That will not break the fast. A person may have a full meal, right? But that will not break the fast, providing he's, out of forgetfulness he's done that. Yeah. So it's important to understand that if a person does any of the things above, in forgetfulness, for example, person woke up, family sleeping, Easter holidays, children are sleeping as well. He's come down early morning on Wednesday, and he's going to work. And out of routine, he's just gone into the kitchen and made himself a cup of tea and made some breakfast and had all of it. And out of forgetfulness, and he goes to work. Now, he's still fasting. Out of forgetfulness, he has done that. So that does not break the fast. If a person eats or drinks accidentally, then only a qada is required, not kafara. Right? So forgetfulness does not break the fast. Yeah? Forgetfulness does not break the fast. That's one thing to understand. If it doesn't break the fast, there's no qada. What about if a person accidentally eats something? Yeah? Then the fast is broken. The fast is broken then. And qada becomes necessary, not kafara. Examples of accidents, like for example, doing wudu. A person was doing wudu and he happened to sip the water and he felt a couple of drops of water go down. So he didn't intend to do it. It happened out of error. It happened out of mistake. Right? So his fast is broken, but he has to do qada, not kafara. And there's many examples of this, things happening accidentally. Things that happen accidentally, they will not break the fast. And it's important to understand this as well, because if a person feels that his fast is broken and he goes about eating, that will become another issue in itself. Those actions that require a qada, only being coerced, forced to eat or drink something, not sure how that happens, but we've heard of the Uyghur Muslims, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect them, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be with them. They were fasting and they've been forced by authorities to eat or drink, or someone plays a joke on their friends or something like that and forces them to eat something. Even if they were to have it, it would not break the fast. Accidentally, without intention, swallowing of food or drink, intentionally eating something that is not normally eaten, example, stone or paper, right? These actions require qada only, right? So intentionally eating something that is not normally eaten, example, a stone or paper, that will require qada, not kafara. Swallowing a morsel of food already in the mouth after subh sadiq enters, something that's in the mouth, and a person swallows it, that will break the fast, but it will not require kafara. Ingesting leftover food in one's mouth that amounts to the size of a chickpea or a something of that small nature, very, a chickpea or more. If it is less, the fast is not invalidated, and hence no qada is necessary. Some more things that require qada only: eating, drinking, or sexual relationship forgetfully, and then thinking the fast is broken to do it again deliberately. So these things do not require kafara. Those actions that require a qada only: swallowing rain, snow, or blood from outside the mouth that enters the mouth on its own, swallowing tears and sweat if one tastes the saltiness throughout the mouth and then swallows. So these are things that break the fast, the sawm, and require qada but no kafara. So as I mentioned earlier, that if something is done intentionally, if eating or drinking is done intentionally, that will break the fast and that will make kafara necessary. That will make qada and kafara necessary. If a person does it from forgetfulness, right? If a person does it forgetfulness, it doesn't break the fast. Right? So no qada, no kafara. If a person eats or drinks something out of by accident, it didn't mean to happen, it just happens, then that breaks the fast. So qada becomes necessary and no kafara. These are certain things that are disliked whilst fasting: tasting of food or chewing it, but not swallowing it, even the flavor, without an invalid excuse. So, for example, young children, a very young child, the parents need to make the food to make sure it's not too hot, to make sure it's the right taste and not too salty or something. The mother or the father puts it in their mouth just to taste it or something. That doesn't break the fast, providing they didn't take it inside. That doesn't break the fast. Similar in terms of toothpaste. If a person brushes his teeth with toothpaste, it's makruh because of the taste factor. It's makruh, it's disliked, but it doesn't break the fast. So we should try and avoid it. Try and brush our teeth beforehand. Use miswak. To use miswak is fine. There's no problem, providing it's not the flavored miswaks. Certain things: delaying the suhoor to the extent that one has doubt in the remaining of the night. Kissing, touching, or hugging one's wife whilst not feeling secure from ejaculation or intercourse. These things are disliked, and however do not break the fast. Doing anything that one thinks will weaken him to the point of breaking the fast, example, cupping or blood transfusion, even exercise. If a person feels that if he's going to do this form of exercise, it's going to make him weak and it's going to make him start complaining about the fast, he should refrain from doing that. It's disliked to do that. It'd be makruh, disliked, but it wouldn't invalidate the fast. The following do not break the fast: eating, drinking, or indulging in sexual intercourse whilst having forgotten about one's fast, as I mentioned earlier as well. However, one must immediately stop the act on remembering. Failure to do so will result in breaking the fast and necessitate a qada and kafara. Swallowing the wetness left over from rinsing the mouth when mixed with one's saliva. Again, if a person, what happens when sometimes when we do wudu, I've seen certain people when once they've done wudu, they're constantly spitting out, and they want to spit out the water that they've used to rinse and gargle their mouth. That's not necessary. Yeah? It wouldn't break the fast. Yeah? That's just part of doing wudu. But if a person is doing ghusl and he's gargling, so he shouldn't gargle with lifting his head and gargling. And the reason being is because lifting the head and gargling will allow little bits of water to go down without being in control. So to refrain from that and localize the gargling, without lifting the head. That's important. Vomiting You know, if a person just vomits without, you know, intentionally vomiting, I don't know how a person intentionally vomits, maybe by putting his fingers down his throat or something. But if a person just vomits, whether little or less, does not break the fast. Does not break the fast. So a person could vomit and it would not break his fast. Rinsing the mouth or the nose without any water proceeding down the throat is fine as well. It doesn't break the fast. If a person puts water into his nose and he really, you know, pulls it up and it goes down into his throat, that will break the fast. Those actions that require nothing and are not disliked as well. So the secretion of the nose mucus proceeding down one's throat when sniffing, placing a wet garment on one's body or taking a bath due to heat, being in the state of janaba when Subh Sadiq enters. This does not, you know, break the fast or is not in any way a problem. Applying surma, you know, kohol, or applying surma in the eye or using contact lenses as well. This does not break the fast. It's not a problem as well. It's not makruh. So for those that wear contact lens, they can continue to wear contact lens. Even if you're using solutions with the contact lens, you could put that, or you could put contact lens into your eyes as well. Injections do not break the fast unless the injection is applied directly into the stomach. The same applies to nicotine or tobacco, birth control patches, IV drips, and etc. Anything that's placed on the body that doesn't go into the gut, that's, you know, it's fine. It doesn't break the fast or anything. The mere entering of a medical test tube into the stomach and then removing it would not break the fast as well. Summary. Fasting. So the summary is a fasting to withhold from eating, drinking, and sexual intercourse during daylight hours from Subh Sadiq till sunset with intention. Intentionally eating, drinking, or engaging in sexual intercourse will require a qadha and kafara. It's important to understand and note the part intentionally. Right? Doing the above out of forgetfulness are excused and forgiven. A mistake will require a qadha only. Anything that risks the fast being broken will be disliked. There are certain points, probably be beneficial to go through. Like for example, contact lens, it doesn't break the fast. Applying a deodorant doesn't break the fast. Eardrops as well. It doesn't break the fast, providing the air is not proliferated and there's a direct connection, which is in most cases is fine. In this, with you know, with new development and understanding of the human body, generally speaking, the scholars have said that anything, you know, if you put air drops into your ears, it does not break the fast. Contact lenses are fine. Eye drops are fine as well. Injections are fine. It does not invalidate the fast. So if a person had to take his COVID injection, the second dose or the first dose in the month of Ramadan, it's fine. Lighting fragrance sticks, incense sticks, they're fine as well, providing a person does not, you know, inhale that smoke. It's fine. Lip balm as well, a person can apply, providing he's not licking it and then, you know, taking that saliva in. Makeup is fine. Mouthwash. Now, mouthwash depends, obviously. It's makruh because of the taste, but if a person was to swallow it, that would break the fast. Nose sprays do break the fast. Yeah, nose sprays do break the fast. So if a person is using the nose spray, he should refrain from it whilst he is fasting. However, if he has to take it, if there's a medical condition that he has to use the nose spray, it may be to do with some allergic reaction or something, then obviously he'd break the fast and have to do qadha and no kafara. Now, there are certain conditions when a person, you know, has to break his fast, and it's important to understand that as well. A person suddenly falls ill or legitimately fears that if the fast is not broken, his life will be in danger, or that his health will deteriorate further. For example, a person experiences severe pains in the stomach and becomes extremely restless, or any form of pain that will, you know, then he can break his fast. Feels extremely thirsty and fears for his life. Was bitten by a poisonous animal. Has asthma and feels like an attack is imminent. In such instances, it will be permissible to break the fast and take some medicine. A pregnant woman encounters certain difficulties and thereby fears for her or her child's life as well. That will also, be okay for her to break her fast. So whilst a person is in the act of ibadah, of sawm, fasting, sometimes he experiences this issue that he becomes really, really ill, or he becomes in a situation that he knows from his previous experiences that he's going to have an asthma attack or something, and it's best that he has, takes the puff of the pump. He should do that, and he shouldn't worry about the kafara aspect and that. If anything is detrimental to your health, Sharia does not stop a person from taking care of that. So if the fast at that time becomes detrimental to his health, he should he should look into the health aspect, take the medication required, break the fast, and make up the fast later. But it's important to get to that stage. Simply not fasting from the beginning of the day, thinking that if I fast, I'm going to have hay fever because of the weather. I usually have asthma attacks. That's not sufficient to refrain from fasting. Yeah. So a person has to fast. And bearing in mind, a person could also calculate in his mind that, look, if a person breaks the fast, then qadha and kafara becomes necessary, right? Especially if it's done intentionally. What about if I don't fast at all and just keep the qadha later in the winter months? Right? It's a severe sin. It is a severe sin. In fact, Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that if a person misses one fast of Ramadan, and to try and recoup the reward of that one fast of Ramadan, he fasts the entire life of his. Even then, he will not, get the same amount of reward and ajr of that one fast that he has missed in the month of Ramadan. That's how rewarding the fast of Ramadan is. Right? So it's important to understand this, and a person would have to do, sincere tawbah to actually be forgiven from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Making up for missed or broken fast. If a person did not fast or has broken his fast, he will have to perform one of the following, as mentioned before: qadha, making up for fast; kafara, expiation. If somebody intentionally breaks his fast without a valid reason, then the person must fast for 2 months consecutively, or feed 60 poor people only if they genuinely can't keep the 60 fast. So kafara, first of all, if a person gets into a situation where he has to do qadha and kafara. Kafara is to fast 60 consecutive days, but it may so become that he becomes really ill, he can't fast that long, because of his health. It's not simply that he can't do it. That's more or less like not wanting to do it. So he has to do it. But a person may be diabetic, or may become diabetic, or has become diabetic, has had some illness or ailments or whatever it may be. Then he can pay the fidya for those 60 fasts. The fidya. This applies only to elderly or terminally ill. In the case the person must feed one poor person twice a day for every day he misses. Yeah. So sometimes a person is not able to fast at all. Stomach ulcers or diabetes, blood pressure, or any form of that illness where a doctor said that, you just simply cannot fast. If you fast, it will be really detrimental to your health. Your health will become worse, and you could go into another situation. So in that case, and providing the person can't fast until the end of his life, he's not able to fast at all. If a person is in such an illness at the moment, but he knows the doctor is saying that you will get better, then fidya cannot be given. Then he has to do qadha later. But if the doctors say that you will never be able to fast, your condition is such, old, weak, frail, diabetes, blood pressure, or whatever other illnesses may be, then a person can give fidya in that state. And the fidya is to feed one poor person twice a day for 60 days. So it's approximately 120 meals. Or give that much into charity to a poor person. Now, kafara, as I mentioned as well, A, fasting 2 consecutive months, which is 60 days, or B is if a person cannot fast. It's not the option, simple option that I can't do the 60 consecutive days, so I'm going to do option B. No, that is if the person cannot fast 60 consecutive. Now, a question that arises, suppose the person, Allah protect us, but suppose the person intentionally broke the fast on 2 different occasions. So one day it so happened that he broke his fast, he went and ate something intentionally, whatever the situation may have occurred. So now he's got qadha and kafara. Few days later, or a year later, or 1 year later, it happens that another situation arises and he broke his fast intentionally, qadha and kafara. Now, qadha he has to do for every single fast, but the kafara, it has to only be done once. So the penalty is only done once. Yeah? So the penalty is only done once. If he does one penalty, that penalty will suffice for all the the crime in his sin in his fasting that he has done. So the penalty is only once. So a person may have something like 400-500 qadha, for example, or maybe 100 qadha fast to do, but he doesn't have to do 100 times 60 consecutive fast. Okay, the fast that a woman misses due to her monthly haze are forgiven. However, once she is purified from her haze, she should immediately recompense with the fasting and complete the 60 days. In terms of if a woman was to do her kafara, if a woman was to do qadha and kafara, so when a woman does her kafara, she can't do 60 consecutive because her fasts are interrupted with her menstrual cycles. So during the menstrual cycle at time, she doesn't do the fast, and after that, she should continue doing the fast. If a few fasts are missed because of a nifas, the fast will not have to be started all over again as well. In the month of Ramadan, if the month of Ramadan comes in between the kafara fast, the kafara will not be valid. Fidya is if a person can't fast, as I mentioned just a little earlier. If a person can't fast, then he should give fidya, which is to feed one poor person with 2 complete meals, or give sadaqatul, which is to give the sadaqatul fitr amount of wheat to a poor person for every single fast that he will be missing. But bearing in mind, that is if a person cannot fast throughout his life. It's also permissible to distribute this fidya among several poor persons, or you could give it to one poor person as well. If the old person happens to regain some of his strength, old or ill person gains strength, or the sick person recovers from his illness, they will have to keep the qadha for all the fasts which they had missed. As for the fidya which they had paid, they will be rewarded for that separately. So that's more or less all the points generally covered. I'm sure there's many questions that are probably so feel free to ask any questions.
Jazakallah khair, brother Imran, Maulana Imran. We've got your presentation, mashallah, was very comprehensive. Lots of detail there, lots to take in. We are recording this. For those who are interested, we can inshallah email this presentation out. Maulana Sahib, we've got a few questions on the chat facility. Are you okay to take some of those questions?
Yes. So if there's any questions, feel free to ask.
Okay. So let me start off then. So the first question was from I believe Sister Uzma. Jazakallah khair for organising this event. Can you please tell me what do we do when some people will fast on Monday, some may fast on Tuesday, some may even fast on Wednesday? How can we avoid this? And I guess this is relating to, if the month of Ramadan is really about making dua, it's a building about our taqwa, it's about repentance, this sense of unity, this sense of community. How can we avoid these problems that we get every year?
Okay, so there's a question that's been asked about, how could we avoid this different starts of the month, in terms of Ramadan. Some people fasting on Monday, some people fasting on Tuesday, and you might find some people fasting on Wednesday or the start. In terms of the fiqh of fasting, there's no real answer to that in terms of the fiqh of fasting. I think it's down to the moon sighting and how the moon has been sighted, or what organization or the moon sighting committee that is being followed. So in terms of the fiqh of fasting, we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unites us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to do Ramadan and Eid on the same day in the whole country. But I don't have any particular answer to that in terms of how that can be facilitated.
Sure, no problem at all. There's another question. How can we encourage children to fast, attend masajid for prayers, etc., when there are differences? Different masjids are fasting different days. Again, it's a similar sort of question. How can we encourage this unity amongst our children? But also a related question: how should we make sure that schools and teachers who encourage children not to fast, how can we tackle that issue? So there'll be a lot of parents who will be listening to this. How can we encourage them?
Okay. Yes, I will take that question. Just 1 minute. Let me just take one question from you. Yes, but we had one question.
You did mention that it's like to fast on the 28th and 29th.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, on the 28th and the 29th of Sha'ban, it's you shouldn't fast. Simply because we need to be prepared for the month of Ramadan, and that fast would be seen as a way of weakening a person's oneself for the Fard fast. That's why a person should refrain from it. But if it so happens that Monday is the 29th of Sha'ban or the 28th of Sha'ban, and a person has regularly fasted on that day, then it's fine for him to fast, because he's in that regular type of fasting system, keeping the Sunnah fast. So that's fine for him to fast on that particular day. Where this is more to do with fasting in the month of Sha'ban, Prophet ﷺ fasted the full month of Ramadan. And the other fast that he kept was the Mondays and the Thursdays and the 13, 14 and 15. Sha'ban is that month that he fasted the most. So from all the other months, Sha'ban is the month that he fasted the most. However, to ensure that you don't fast on the 28th and 29th. But again, if it's a Monday fast and a person is always fasting on a Monday, then it's fine to fast. The other question that has been asked by someone is that how do you encourage children to fast, and how do you encourage, make sure that they are not discouraged by schools or by teachers not to fast? So it's teaching our children what's necessary, what's important for them to do, and to give them the understanding that fast is farz, and you have to fast from this particular age once you've passed the age of puberty. So it becomes necessary on you. Like anything else, when it's necessary, then it's necessary. And where you feel that your health is going to be affected, then it's important to try and go around that with having the right type of food at suhoor, and also having the right type of activities in school. And generally speaking, a fasting person, he's able to at times do better in terms of thinking and in terms of being able to go about his life, providing he manages his situation. Obviously, encouragement by the reward of fasting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed a reward for every single action. But in terms of fasting, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not specified any amount. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give the reward of a fasting person through his generosity. The generosity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ready to give us 10 for one, you can imagine how much he will give for fasting.
Dr. Imran, I've got another question which is not on the chat, but I had a separate question here. This is to do with taqwa. You talked about taqwa there, alhamdulillah. The month of Ramadan is an opportunity to build that taqwa. But we also know taqwa isn't just about rituals. It's not just about having, doing the nafila and fasting and going to the masajid. These are all vital, very important. But how do we make sure that the whole month of Ramadan and building this taqwa becomes part and parcel of our life? And so every action that we do in our life, every aspect of our life becomes based upon the Quran and the Sunnah. How do we make sure that happens? How can we encourage children and our families to do that?
So how do you, the question is, how do you develop taqwa throughout the month of Ramadan? So developing taqwa, so to first understand what is taqwa. So taqwa is to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all knowing. And with that, to spend every moment of the day. Now, this might require that a person, when he wakes up in the morning, he should think to himself and to, affirm himself that, okay, let me go about my day, and to understand that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I need to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any action I do, I need to first think before I do this action, and keep reconfirming and reaffirming this notion in one's mind throughout the day. So in the morning, in the afternoon, and then in the evening as well. And every action that a person does, maybe think about, why am I doing this action? What's the purpose of this action? And why am I doing it? What's the benefits for it in me? Why does Allah, does Allah want me to do this? Does Allah not want me to do this? If this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to do, how did Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam do this action? Now, so developing the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this will hopefully help us to encourage ourselves to develop that taqwa. So inshallah, yeah.
Jazakallah khair. I think there's a question there. I think your presentation covered it, but just to summarize, there's a question from Brother Yusuf, who's asking about the vaccination program and taking vaccination, particularly COVID vaccination, I guess, during Ramadan. Does that nullify your fast? I think you said if it's an injection, I believe it doesn't nullify it. Could you clarify that, please?
That's right. So any injection does not nullify the fast. An injection does not nullify the fast. The COVID injection will not nullify the fast.
Sure. Jazakallah. And there's just final two questions, very briefly. There's a question from a sister here. A woman, she's sort of describing, a woman was almost continually pregnant and breastfeeding for 10 years. And she had to make a lot of, around 300 days of fast. But even when she became better, she was very scared of fasting. Is she sinful? Does she still have to make up those fasts?
So the fast that she's missed over so many years. So the question is that a woman has been pregnant for the past 10 years, and she's been through multiple pregnancies, and she's not been able to fast. Would she have to make those fasts up? Yes, she will have to make those fasts up, and she'll have to do qada of those fasts as soon as she can, really. There's always one other question, is that, do you have to make your qada before the next Ramadan? And the answer to that is no, you don't have to make your qada of the fast before the next Ramadan. But it's important to understand that you should make your qada as soon as possible, because we don't know how, we're not certain of how of our life. So yeah.
So one final question from the chat facilities. So a sister called Samira, she's asking about women generally. She's talking about, some of them will have health issues, some of them have mental health issues, kids to look after, lots of stress and anxiety. And we know over this COVID period, a lot of people have been suffering, including the mothers. Obviously, they've had it very hard. How can they balance between all that and then having to fast?
Okay, so in terms of generally at home or wherever we are, so fasting requires a lot of sabr, and I know some people who struggle with mental health issues and suffer from stress and anxiety, and also have children with special needs to care for. They are very worried about being able to cope with fasting on top of what would you advise? Okay. About those. Okay, so yes, the fiqh of fasting doesn't cover mental health. Now, that's right. I mean, in terms of so if a person struggles with mental health and they're not able to fast, then yeah, they could defer their fast and do qada of the fast later, when it becomes a bit easier for them, or when the days are shorter, like in the December months, in the winter months, the days are shorter. But providing they're missing the fast because of their illness and their ailment of mental health, that the mental health, they're struggling so much at home and they're not able to keep up with it, it becomes really stressful. With the stress, anxiety builds, and with the anxiety, other matters affect them. So then, they could break their fast and then they would have to do qada of it. If they were to not fast from the beginning from the beginning of the fast, thinking that it will affect them, I think it's better that they start the fast and try and see through the day. Where it gets too much for them, it becomes overwhelming for them, and especially where you've got children with special needs. Experience it for a few days of fasting and see how it goes. If not, then yes, in that case, maybe fast the shorter days, which is a winter months, and hopefully that will be better managed, and at the same time repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for not being able to do the fast at the right time, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive.
Maulana Imran, Jazakallah khair for your presentation. Very, very informative. So I guess in terms of a summary, there's a lot of details that you went through around what's allowed, what's not allowed in terms of keeping fast, what breaks the fast, what invalidates the fast. You talked about building, your closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your taqwa. This is all about developing our aqliya and our nafsiyya. How do we make sure we use the month of Ramadan as a platform, if you like, to make sure that our taqwa and our actions throughout our life's affairs are based upon Islam. It's also an opportunity. Actually, you talked about reading the Quran and studying and understanding the Quran. Learning the lessons from the seerah. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, how he worked for the change in Mecca. How he gave dawah, how he engaged the wider society, and gave an example of how a Muslim should behave. So on that note, I will say Jazakallah khair to you, but you are still around, inshallah. So if people have further questions, they can raise those questions after our next session. So Jazakallah khair for that. Dr. Saif, Assalamu alaikum. Are you with us?
Welcome.
Brilliant. So welcome, Dr. Saif. Really appreciate you joining our session. Really important that we also, the Maulana Sahib talked about a lot of practical stuff around, the fiqh side of things, but we also need to know, practical stuff in terms of the health. The things that we're allowed to do, the things we are not allowed to do. How does the month of fasting impact our health? So I'm not going to go into the details. I'm also conscious of timing. So, Dr. Saif is a consultant, hospital consultant. Obviously, he's an expert, if you like. He's aware of some of these issues to do with health. So, inshallah, I'll pass over to Dr. Saif, and he will go through his presentation. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, please use the chat facility, and we can take those questions at the end of this session, inshallah. So keep joining. Do not go away at the moment, inshallah. A very, very informative session now, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Can everybody hear me and see my presentation? I take.
Yep.
I'm hoping that's a yes. And can I check with Maulana Imran that the mosque can see the presentation?
Maulana Imran, are people in the mission able to see the presentation? Can they hear Dr. Saif as well?
Yes, you can start. Yes, you can start.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. So they can hear me clearly, yes? Okay, good. Thank you very much for that presentation, Maulana Imran, because that was very informative, and I think it sort of covered a lot of the stuff that I will be touching up on as well. I think Ramadan, like the Maulana advised, is attaining taqwa. But obviously, a lot of us see Ramadan as a time for food and to, spend time with the children, be happy. And I think food is important, but we don't want it to be a distraction for the main purpose of Ramadan. So I've just got some slides, so we'll just go through that quickly, really. So, just giving some general advice. As the Maulana has mentioned, fasting this year is probably going to be around about, say, starting 4 something, finishing about 8ish. So maybe about 17, 18 hours. So what we do is we tend to we're not eating for those hours and then we try and make up for it in those 6-7 hours. And I think that clearly is wrong. Normally we tend to spend 18-19 hours eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks and things like that. And the other thing about Ramadan is we tend to eat the wrong type of food. So classically, Bengali typical household, my household, biryanis, samosas, pakoras, all of those stuff that we probably wouldn't eat in one day, we tend to eat. And no matter how much we try, we still end up eating those things, really, which is the wrong thing. We also have this thing that we've got 5 or 6 hours to get our sort of rest, recuperation, get our tarawih out of the way, all of our salah, and still wake up in time for suhoor, try and get some sleep, trying to go to work. So there, we're sort of, the main thing is we're constraining all of those activities in a few hours, and that really doesn't help us. Just a quick, I'm not trying to teach you medicine or science here. But normally, once we've eaten, you've got glucose, you've got carbohydrates, you've got things which are easy for the body to take up and use as energy, things which has to break down. So normally, if you've had, some suhoor, by about 11, 12 o'clock the next day, the glucose has gone out of your system, so the easy energy, as it were, has been used up. So the body has to get some more from somewhere, and that's where it goes and breaks down stores, and usually that's glycogen. And once it's done that, then it goes to fat. But unfortunately, the fat doesn't start to break up to around about 12 to 14 hours later. And if you continue to fast for, say, 2-3 days in a row without eating any food, then you may continue to use up fat. But we tend to replenish those by the time we get to iftar. And this goes back to the point that if we're having sort of heavy fried foods, we tend to replenish the fats as well. So you don't really tend to lose much weight or lose much fat. The presentation, I will try and touch upon the common medical conditions. So, diabetes, gastric problems, pregnancy is something which the Maulana's mentioned, but I'm going to pass and mention that passing. Also about medications, because a lot of, we may be on medications, our parents may be on medications, uncles, aunts, and it's about how do we take medications during Ramadan. And as the Maulana's already mentioned, that you can't break fast. Islam doesn't say you can't break fast, but there's rules around it, and I think the Maulana's mentioned them fairly clearly. And I'm going to touch upon a couple of medical issues where you may want to consider, if fast should be broken or can be broken, and also when you should seek medical help. Fasting has many benefits, and we've talked about the from our deen, but also there's health benefits of fasting, things which are being more noticed now. You've seen the fads about intermittent fasting, 2 and 5, 5 and 2, 3s, and they talk about all this stuff. Obviously, their fasting is slightly different from what we do in terms of Ramadan. But just to go through a couple of the benefits that they talk about. When somebody fasts, and this is again once you've got to say 12, 13 hours, so you could say in the longer days in this country, we probably get into that realms. There's evidence to show that it does help with brain regeneration. There's a process called autophagy, which is basically a waste clearance system. So essentially, when you get to that state, somehow the brain, because of the fasting state, it disposes of molecules which have been damaged, which can cause neurological disorders. Through fasting, the cellular cleansing ensures the brain both develops and functions optimally. And it's been shown that there's an increase of this thing called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which has been linked. So if you've got a reduction in that, you've got an increased incidence of things like Alzheimer's, dementia, and other cognitive disorders. So fasting tends to increase the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which then is thought to help reverse some of the dementia-type illnesses or prevents its onset. So that seemed to be helpful. There's also neurogenesis, where new brain cells are being developed. So you've got new connections from one part to another, and again, that can improve your cognitive abilities, thinking and things. All of the things that we tend to think with fasting doesn't happen, especially classic thing you hear from our children is that, well, I've got exams tomorrow, I'm not going to do well, so I shouldn't fast and things like that. Science is actually saying the opposite. So if you're fasting, it will actually help you. we're going to touch on that a bit later. Stress response, it's thought that with when you fast, there is a stress response which improves inflammation or reduces inflammation, so it improves those health issues. So people who have chronic inflammation, say arthritis or other inflammatory processes, fasting actually is thought to help overcome that. And you may find during fasting people don't need as many medications as they thought they would do. And one of the factors is this, really. Productivity, because if you think about it, if you spend your active day, especially the mothers, the sisters, unfortunately you're doing all the cooking and things most of the time, you know, in the morning you're going to make breakfast, then you're going to make something, you know, the 11s for the children, if then, you know, if they do lockdown, I'm sure you've noticed this. But even if we go to work, there's always the 11s, you know, the mid-morning snacks, then you've got the lunch, then you've got the afternoon snacks, then you've got the dinner and after dinner desserts and things. And you're forever spending the whole day from one food to another. And a lot of it is due to marketing, because, you know, innately, from a health perspective, from a thing, there is no such thing about you know, your body doesn't need 3 meals a day. Otherwise, none of us would be able to fast. Because if you think about it, if we needed 3 meals a day to actually live or function, then fasting, we shouldn't be able to do fasting. A lot of the things we see in fasting is because that's how we've been, you know, we've been conditioned that, you know, while I'm feeling a bit sluggish, it's because I'm not really eaten. I'm feeling a bit weak. I'm not eating. I'm not as productive because I didn't eat. Well, at the time of the Sahaba, they were fighting in jihad. So if that was the case, they wouldn't be fighting. So I think the reality is a lot of it is we've been conditioned to think one way. So without food being the center of your world, as it were, productivity really increases. And you find during Ramadan, we do a lot more, you know, we can get a lot more things done if we actually look at it that way. You know, it's not fun for all of people to fast. So Maulana went through a lot of these things, you know, so I'm not going to repeat all of those things. Health problems. I think this really sums it up, you know. I think the top one is iftar time, and the bottom one is probably 5 minutes after iftar time, because we've sort of crammed all the food we can think of within a short period of time. And, you know, scientifically, it's said that the eyes register the food before your stomach does. So classically, you know, you sort of eat away, and then after about 10 minutes, you stop because there's no more food. And then 20 minutes later, you feel full up. But it's taken that time for your brain to register and your stomach to register, you know, the connections to go and say you've actually eaten. So this is the classic thing that you see. Many problems, gastric problems. It's what I mentioned earlier. We're eating the wrong food at the wrong time. So at 8 o'clock or 8:30, we've eaten, you know, all of the fried foods. Maybe I'm the only person eating fried foods. I don't think I am actually, but I think a lot of us will eat fried foods, cakes, sweets, you know, energy drinks and things. You know, the fast sugar and fast things like that. We eat all of those things. The gastric juices are there, and then we probably, you know, within a few hours of having eaten, we're off to sleep, or in a couple of hours of eating, we're off to sleep. We eat a lot of spicy foods. Again, that short time and a lot of food, really. So you've got the gastric problems, you've got headaches and migraines. By a mixture of, I think the main problem here is dehydration. We don't drink enough. Again, we've got 6 or so hours to drink as much as we can, and maybe we don't drink the right stuff. We tend to eat a lot. You know, a lot of people have coffees and things, and those are the wrong drinks to have. So the best drinks to have really are your waters, your pure fruit juices, those type of things. You know, not the. I'm sure we've all got those wonderful sharbat. You know, I think Rufa or something is one of the names that comes into. You know, those are the wrong things to have. There's a lot of sugary drinks we should be avoiding. A lot of people get migraines. I think the figures I was looking at, something like 90 million people, this is just Muslims, during the month of Ramadan, encounter migraines. And, you know, it's just made worse because of the stresses of fasting. Dehydration, I've already mentioned, and, you know, there's a slide that we'll talk about dehydration a bit later, because I think it's important. Stress, we do feel stressed, and a lot of that is because, again, I think, you know, as I showed earlier, from a health perspective, the stress reaction is a positive thing, but I think this is more psychological. You know, we get very anxious that we're going to be hungry. We're not going to be able to last the day. We're not going to be able to, you know, if there's a problem, I've got a headache, it must be because I've not eaten enough. You know, there's a problem there, and it's always we link it to the fact that we've not had food, and food is not the real reason for stress. It's other things that we've attributed it to. Weight. Again, there's a slide I'm going to about the weight issue. Diabetes is an important thing, and I think that's something for us to really, I think, is, we should encounter, and I will go through it in a few slides. The gastric problem. Again, as I said, the reason why we get gastric is because of irregular times and diets, which then play around with the acid production. You've eaten, the acid is digesting the food away. You go to bed 2 hours later, it's not fully digested. The acid then may come back and then causes reflux, and we have problems. Normally, you'd have eaten 6, 7, 8 o'clock maybe. You've still got 2-3 hours before you go to bed. It's had time to digest. So the way around that is smaller meals, the correct meals, avoiding fatty foods where possible, avoiding spicy foods where possible. If you do take antacids, take them. Don't think because it's Ramadan I can't take them. Take them at the right time, obviously. You can't take it during the day, but once you've broken your fast, take them. And if they're taken before you go to bed after suhoor. Again, reducing caffeine and things like that is helpful. I think there is a way to manage them. If you take the right foods, you take your medications if you need them on time, and also avoid caffeine, smoking, things like those things. The Prophet ﷺ used to, I think, there's a drink, nabiz, I think is what it's called, that you mix ajwa dates or raisins and sultanas in water. And I think when I was looking into this, you mix it for, leave it for about 10-12 hours, and then you either have the juice or you blitz the, you make into a sort of a smoothie. And those are things that which the Prophet ﷺ used to have in his time to try and prevent any gastric problems. Headaches, common. So now I think the main reason for that is the dehydration. We just don't have enough water, and I will go on to that a bit later, really. But hunger does play part of it, because if you're eating the wrong foods, if you're just eating your sort of glucose bars and having your energy drinks, those things, like I talked about earlier, the glucose tends to wane after about 8-9 hours. So if you have not got any other longer acting food there, which the body can utilize, you will feel hungry. And part of it is this whole conditioning that we're used to having 3 meals a day and snacks in between. So we've done that for 11 months, and then we go to 1 month where we change it. And so part of the thing is maybe to look at that. Do we really need to have these 3 meals a day? I'm not saying we shouldn't have 3 regular meals, but all the other snacks and the type of food we eat and things. The rest is another cause for headaches if we don't have enough rest. So some of us may, have us iftar at 8-9 o'clock, go to Tarawih, come back. By the time we go to bed, it's midnight. We want to get up for suhoor for the benefits that the Maulana mentioned. We tend to sleep 3-4 hours, pray Fajr, go to sleep another 1 or 2 hours, then we'll go to work. So you've not had enough rest. That is going to be an issue. Those people who are used to having the caffeine and nicotine, my wife finds that she gets headaches, and she puts it down to lack of her tea in the morning. So that could be an issue. So that compounds all of those things. So if you've got all of those building blocks and you're knocking them all over, then you're going to get headaches, really. Like I mentioned, migraines are 3 times more common during Ramadan. This is a nice slide. It just shows you how much of our body is made of water. So it's quite a lot, isn't it? I mean, even in bone, more than a fifth is water. 2/3 of our body is water. So we need a lot of water, and we don't probably get that. Like I said, it's reduced water intake. How much water should we have in an average day? I think, if we stick to the norms of at least 2 to 3 litres of fluid a day. So during the month of Ramadan, in those hours between 8:39 till 4 o'clock or 3:30, as the month goes along, I think the days get longer. So the time of when you can eat is shorter. But if you aim to have at least 2 to 3 litres of water, and it doesn't mean you sort of finish those 3 litres straight away after iftar. It's about putting in small bits. So I tend to have a little sip. So if you go to Tarawih, if the Masad is this year, obviously you have to take your own water, take a bottle, a litre bottle. Obviously some people will then have to go to the toilet, so you've got to take that into consideration. But if you take sips rather than empty the bottle in one go, those small sips through the night, and if you aim to drink at least 2 to 3 litres, that will be good. And I think that will avoid headaches. And I think that's one of the biggest advice I give friends, family, is to have the water, because that does prevent the headaches, which most people think is due to hunger, but it's not. It's mostly due to lack of water. Medication. Some medications will do that. Many people will be on blood pressure tablets, and some of those tablets cause you to pass urine. So you need to consider that and the timing for that. It's probably better to take it after iftar if you only have to take it once a day rather than taking it before suhoor. But speak to your GP, because if it's going to be twice a day, can they change you to a different medication which may control your blood pressure, and so that you don't have to take this. Some people have heart problems, which means they're on water tablets. So it's about looking at the timing and maybe avoiding or replacing with something else. But a discussion with your GP will always help you. Headaches I've already mentioned. Dehydration will also reduce the alertness, simply because your body, the muscles, the brain, everything which requires all of this, normally brain is 74% water. If you've got to reduce that, then your brain is going to be a bit more sluggish. I think normally a lot of people put it down to the fact that they haven't had any food. It's water that's the main thing, because you could live without food. I think it says about 30 days, but with water, a few days, and after that, your life is going to be at risk, really. Again, lethargy goes same with it. So I think water, to me, water is more important than food. So I think if there's anything you take away from this, is drink small sips of water as the day goes along, after you've broken your fast and before suhoor. Stress, and I've already mentioned this issue about stress and the reasons why it happens. But it is lack of food and drink can cause stress and irritability. Not for the reasons that most people think. I think it's because people get fixated on that, and that's what makes them more anxious. And I think one of the sisters mentioned earlier about the mental health issues. And I think it's important that we do recognise mental health issues, because whilst the physical issues, everybody can see, mental health issues are inside inward. So I think with mental health, it's as important to make sure the medications are being taken. And if you see somebody who's struggling, then maybe you need to remind them, should they be fasting or should they stop fasting? And that time you may want to get them to see their GP. And if it's really serious, make them stop their fasting. Because I think mental health can really, the time from being unwell to being seriously unwell is very short. Whereas physical health, you can see the changes and people can recognize that. So I think it's important there. Stress, again, lack of sleep. One of the things, some people can, some people can't. If you can ask your employers, can you change your working hours? I think a lot of employers now actually are more understanding. For me, the places I work, and I've already done this, is that I request a month or two in advance. Look, the month of Ramadan is likely to be around about the 12th or the 13th of April. I'm not sure yet, but can I please start a couple of hours, my clinic's a couple of hours later? And most people are very understanding. One or two, you may not be able to push it as much, but if you ask, they will actually move your working times. And especially now, a lot of us are working from home. So you could argue, is it flexible working hours? In which case, you may want to maybe start work around about, say, 11 o'clock or something. So you've got a couple of hours extra sleep, which you make up the work at the end of the day. So I think, lack of sleep is an important factor for stress. And if you can do anything to change that by changing work, unfortunately, some people can't, which I understand. In which case, after you come home, is having a siesta. The stuff that people have in the warm, hotter climates. We're not used to it in this country, but it was a sunnah of the Prophet as well, that when it's middle of the day, having an hour or so. Some people can have those naps, other people can't. So if you can, then you should have that. Stress is going to be lack of those stimulants. So people who are used to having the caffeine intake every day, some of us have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cups of coffee or tea a day, which we think keeps us going. Our body and our brain are used to it, and once it's not there, then we feel the negative effects of it. Those of us who are on tobacco, same thing. The other thing is, I find we think that during Ramadan we can still do the same things. Go to football, go to the parents' evening. We can go down to the after-school activities. Gym. We need to understand the month of Ramadan is for ibadat and to attain taqwa. So really something has to give. If we're trying to spend more time there, then we've got to really reduce the other things. We've got to prioritize what's important for us that day. If we think we're going to attain everything in that time with the same amount of energy and things like that, it's not going to happen. So we need to understand and we need to prioritize and maybe just reduce some of our activities. Some people from the month of Ramadan will cut out gym. Other people, like the Maulana said, cut out your phone as much as you can. So reduce the activity. Don't get involved in extra, activities at work. Don't sort of volunteer for things at work or in the community. That time you have to really, just think about yourself and how to best manage Ramadan. This is an interesting question. I mean, obviously we're on mute, but I would ask you how many people think they lose weight, how many people think they gain weight, how many people think it doesn't matter. I mean, do make your own mind up and decision, and see what you think. But there are studies which show people do lose weight. There are studies which show people don't lose anything. There are studies which show people gain weight. And I think it depends where you are and what you eat. The old adage, you are what you eat, really. I think, if I was to say, what should you have for Ramadan? I would say eat lots of slow releasing carbohydrates. Wheat, oats, semolina, beans, whole milk flour, basmati rice is supposed to be the best. Brown basmati is supposed to be better than normal basmati, and that's supposed to be better than white rice. Porridge, so those things which will release energy slowly, so it just keeps you going through the day. The things that you should avoid are those things: cakes, biscuits, chocolate, sweets, and I suspect pakoras will be on that list, and samosas and biryanis, because those, parts of it will be the short-acting stuff, parts will be long-acting. So I think if you can eat more of the porridgey, the boring foods, I suppose, the better. I mean, you could argue the biryani with the basmati rice is good, yes, but there's also lots of oils and things which aren't good for you and your health. Different ways of cooking. I think the air fryer, it seems to be coming out more of a fad, and maybe it's a fad, maybe it's not. But using the air fryers rather than using deep fried the samosas, brushing with some oil and putting in the air fryer, maybe more healthier than putting in deep oil. Shallow frying is healthier than deep frying. Putting in the oven is healthier than frying. So all of those things that I'm sure we all try, I think those are things to help. The type of oils, olive oil is better than vegetable oil. So getting the benefits of that. And again, before we go into the next one on diabetes, at iftar, maybe breaking your iftar with the dates and some water, and then maybe having some soup before you get onto the main meals. Giving it 10 minutes or so. So maybe having your dates, your water, a soup or something light, and then spending time to pray your maghrib, and then coming back to your food. It's giving that 10-15 minutes for your brain to register that you've had some food go in. So the next food you eat, you don't need to, you eat less. And even then it's looking at the food, maybe more fruit, maybe more vegetable, maybe more pulses rather than the fried stuff. So those are things for you to consider, really. Fasting and diabetes. There are many diabetes. I mean, in the Asian community, I think between 1 in 3 or even up to 2 in 3 people are diabetic or will be diabetic in their life. I'm sure we all know somebody who's diabetic, if maybe even be us. So it's very common, diabetes. We've got the type 1 insulin. So these tend to be more younger people who have to take insulin 2-3 times a day. They have to check their blood sugar before they do take the insulin. You've got the type 2 diabetics, who are the more elderly, sort of people who probably started with tablets, but now need insulin, and they've got lots of complications. Type 2 who are tablets only, type 2 who are diet only. And I think, in terms of people who are diet only and medication, I think generally most people fast without any problems. People on insulin tends to get more difficult. And I think if you're on insulin, you've probably very difficult to fast. Some people do it, but some people find they do run into complications. And I think if you are an insulin-dependent diabetic, maybe you may fall into those categories where you pay fidya or and pay someone as a without and not fast, because I think that could be very detrimental to your health. It'd be life threatening. So, but discuss that with your doctors and also your imam, so you have the best understanding. I think for that, in terms of health, sincerely whether something is life threatening or not. And so I think you have to be standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Yawm al-Qiyamah to answer for your actions. So as long as you do it sincerely, then I think that should be fine. So speak to your doctor, specialist, and speak to your local imam to understand whether you should, if you're insulin dependent diabetic, whether you should be fasting or not, and how safely you should do it. Again, I think the Maulana covered some of this stuff, but checking your blood sugar is fine. It's I would encourage, especially if you're taking insulin, to check it regularly. And even if you are not taking insulin, you're not a diabetic, and you feel lightheaded or something, check your BM, because it could be your blood sugar has gone very low, and you need to take some food and you have to break your fast. And low blood sugar, which is hypoglycemia, must be treated, because if you don't, you will only go. Worst case scenario, you could end up in a coma. So it is serious. It's life-threatening. There are different risk categories, and I'm not going to go through that in this. If you are a high risk, then you may need to break your fast, and you should do that. Pregnancy, I think the Maulana did mention a lot of this stuff, but some pregnancies are complicated, some are very easy. So I think you have to judge every situation. If your pregnancy is low risk, then you're fine. No reason why you can't fast. But if your pregnancy is high risk, or there's threats to the baby, or there is issues there, then you may need to make up a fast later. But speak to the midwife, speak to your specialist, speak to your GP, and make a decision. And if required, speak to an imam, because who can then give you, interpret from the Shara and what you're allowed and what you're allowed and what you're not allowed to do. Obviously, after birth, you won't be able to fast for a certain day anyway. And if you're breastfeeding, maybe you have to break your fast. In most cases, people don't fast when they're breastfeeding because of the fact that they've got to feed their children and the impact on them. There's also the case that fasting affects pregnancy in terms of the size of the baby. There is some evidence which has shown that women who fast, pregnant women who fast during Ramadan, have smaller babies, and they could be prone to problems in the children. This is into adulthood, but this is just a very small study. So those things people need to take into consideration when they think about whether they should fast or not. We are, normally we get into the exam season, so a lot of students are concerned about this. But I think what I've tried to show is that fasting necessarily does not make you sluggish, does not make you very slow in your thinking. If anything, it's the other thing. It actually sharpens your thoughts and wits. So I think, my advice to them would be that they need to prepare and plan. And I think it's like anything, if we sort of rehearse what we're going to do the next day, things tend to go, you have a framework of thinking, don't you? So if you're going to go somewhere to visit some relatives, once lockdown opens up and all of that stuff, you sort of say, right, I'm going to go to Birmingham, I'm going to plan to go onto the M1 or the M40 or the M25, whatever. You have a plan. And then you that's the framework. And then you change that should you need to. And I think this then allows them to just understand what they can preempt any problems. They should be well rested, the night before. Maybe rather than going to the masjid to do Tarawih, do Tarawih at home. Wake up a few minutes before Suhoor, and maybe not pray the Salat al-Tahajjud if they feel that's going to affect them. If it's an afternoon exam, maybe they can, but getting the rest. And again, avoiding I'm sure we all have children who think that they need to go and play football whilst they're fasting and they've got an exam the next day. Well, something's got to give. And I think, prioritize what, which is the most important. do have suhoor and have the right food. So I think, having some porridge or something like that, I know it seems boring by the children, but that's probably the more sensible food to have if they're going to be, having exams. So they want to be alert, and having that type of food there, being, hydrated. And during the day, have short rests between exams and things. If you can have a short sleep, that's great. If you can't, then at least in a quiet area where you can gather your thoughts. One of the things, wudu. If you're feeling lethargic or irritated, doing wudu calms you down. And I think, I'm sure we've all seen it from our reality. So I think this is, I can't hide it, I think that's very important. I think wudu does help. And again, like I said, foods, choosing the right food. So your porridge type food, vegetables, protein, healthy fats, avocado, butter, eggs, olive oils, nuts. These things will help, fuel you with the right things to keep you going for the 17, 18-hour days that we're going to have. I think there's a mention about COVID, and I think I would totally agree with the Maulana that COVID vaccinations, those injections aren't thought to be nourishing, so therefore they are fine. If you've got your second one coming up, then you have to. If you can move it to after, then fine. So it's allowed, but if you can move it, that's great. It's, those things we control, and we should try and because it gives us time. Because with a COVID vaccination, you can get side effects which may then make you, affect your ability to do your tilawah and things like that. So it is allowed, but if I would personally move it if you can. If you can't, then go ahead with it. It's not a problem. In summary, really, it's about planning ahead. It's about just thinking, how to, what the right foods to have, planning ahead for your own health issues, your fathers or your mothers or your relatives, uncles, aunts. It's, speaking to the GPs and saying, well, can I change the medication to a different type, which will not give me this side effect or this effect? Can I change the timing of it? Sometimes the gastric problems, maybe it's a different type of food. So if we change the spicy and the oily foods to something more bland, as it were, then maybe you won't get those heartburn. And I think if some people find during Ramadan their health actually improves. The inflammation, like I mentioned, fasting actually reduces inflammation. So all of those inflammatory problems do get better. But you speak to your GP, your specialist. I know we're coming to Ramadan next few days, but maybe for next year, is if you plan ahead 2-3 months before, is to speak to them and say, look, this is what I plan to do. If you've still got time, then do so. It's eating the correct foods at the correct time. It's ensuring that you get the rest that you should be getting. It's ensuring that you have the fluid. So making sure that you have sips of water, 2-3 liters of water between iftar and suhoor. Just making sure you get that in. Because I think if you do that, you'll find a lot of this, these sort of headaches sort of at the back of the head you get around about 6-7 o'clock I think will disappear if you have the 2-3 liters of water a day. And if things aren't looking good, keep an eye on yourself, keep an eye on your relatives, keep an eye on your parents. If things aren't looking good, then seek help. And if it's a diabetic or somebody with severe mental health problems or other health issues, if you need to break fast, Islam allows it, so you should do it. I think that's my presentation. I think a lot of the stuff has been mentioned before, and I know we probably wanted to finish by a bit earlier, but we've gone on, so that's good. But I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has on any specific issues related to health and fasting. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. Again, very thorough presentation, a very informative presentation. I'm sure a lot of people benefited from your presentation. I am conscious of time, and we do have a couple of questions that I want to tackle. Some of the other points that have been made in the chat facility have already been covered, so there's no point in repeating some of those. But just a reminder for everybody, this event is organised by Waltham Forest and North London Muslim Parents Association. These are organisations that are working in the community. They're working with the schools, they're working with the parents, The idea is about building our Islamic nafsiyah and Islamic taqwa amongst our community. We're tackling some of those issues that impact all of us, and particularly if you have young children and if you are parents going through difficult times, particularly during COVID. Some of the issues we have obviously covered help the community. So today's session, Dr. Saiful really went through some health issues to do with the medical side of things that we should avoid, things that we should encourage ourselves to do. And Maulana Imran obviously went through some of the fiqh issues. So Dr. Saif, just one question. There's a final question that I've seen on the chat facility. You talked about the Sahaba and how they sort of tackled fasting. Was this to do with them being active in Ramadan, or was this not more to do with the strength of belief rather than just having the right diet?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer because I wasn't there, but I would have thought the belief has a lot to do with it. However, their diet was simple. They didn't have all these food that we tend to have. Their diets would have maintained, dates, which is again a very strong source of fiber, energy. And I think that's one thing I've sort of mentioned. Fiber is important for our diet, I think, especially in Ramadan. So that would remove a lot of the gastric problems that we see. So having things like that will be helpful. But definitely, I mean, the Sahaba had the best of creation with them. So no doubt they were getting the benefits of Ramadan more than we ever could hope to. So I'm sure it has a lot to do with the belief that they had and the support they had and the guidance they had from the best of creation, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So I think that's probably the main thing about their activities. But we see the Muslims throughout history. The point I was trying to make is that a lot of people think that, I'm fasting, I should just sit in a corner and just, maybe occasionally if I have the energy, just read some Quran or just tasbih or just lie there and just not do much. I'm trying to say, well, that's not reality. The Sahaba and the Muslims before did do things in Ramadan, and they did not give the excuse that I'm fasting for the reasons. Rather, they did those things because they were saying I'm fasting, because that's the taqwa, the belief comes in, because that allows me to do things. And I think we've got to the situation where we think that, I've come home from work, I'm just going to sit in a corner or just go to sleep. Yes, whilst you should rest and whilst you should sleep and all those stuff, that's in moderation. Everything's in moderation. The food we eat should be in moderation. But also we should not negate the fact that the main purpose of Ramadan is to attain taqwa. And that is to look at our deen and do what we've instructed to do holistically. So that's the main thing I was really mentioning rather than anything else.
Jazakallah. Maulana Imran, are there any questions from your audience, from the masjid?
No, there's no questions at the moment, no.
Okay, Jazakallah for that. So, Dr. Saif, there's one question that we've got. I know we briefly covered this earlier on with the Maulana's session. This is around, and this is important only because there's a lot of parents obviously logging on to this session today. But what advice can you give to parents, particularly when teachers discourage our children from fasting, particularly during exam times? And they will cite health reasons for not fasting. How should we deal with this sort of thing? How should parents deal with this sort of scenario?
Well, I think, as I said in one of my slides, there's, fasting doesn't make you very slow in your thinking. Exactly the opposite, really. It actually gets you more alert. And I think we've got to this custom, the fact that, if we're fasting, we can't be doing much. As I said, get the children to prepare well, revise for their exams in advance, rest, reduce the activities they do. So, if the parents are worried about their children not being energetic enough for the exams, well, let them rest during the days. Don't, if they think Tarawih for an hour and a half, 2 hours in the masjid is going to be too much, we'll let them pray at home. So I think those things I would suggest. I don't think the fact that they're fasting is going to affect their exam outcome or preparation. I think, the fasting is not the big issue. I think it's the other things that people do. And as we know, tawakal Allah. So we trust in Allah, we prepare the best we can. And in Ramadan, I don't think fasting is going to hinder their preparation.
No, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. And I know somebody's saying in the chat facility here as well, they're saying having that rest is really important. Planning ahead your day is really important. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to stop fasting just because you've got an exam or you have to go to school. That you're definitely right about that. If are there any more questions that we have? I don't think there's any more questions in the chat facility there. If there are no more questions, I am conscious of time. I know both Maulana and yourself have got other engagements. So this leaves me to sort of thank you both for joining our session today. It's been very helpful. It's been very fruitful discussion. We are recording this session, so inshallah we will share this as soon as we are able to do so. But let's all inshallah use the month of Ramadan as a blessing for ourselves, as a way of building that taqwa, as a way of getting closer to the Quran. You know, learn about the seerah, learn about the Sahaba. What did they do? How did they build their confidence in abiding by all rules relating to Islam, not only during the month of Ramadan, but afterwards as well. So let's make Ramadan as a way of prioritizing our lives. We've gone through difficult times with COVID. Let's use this time to be close to our families, close to our children, build that quality time with them, and inshallah seek that reward. And please keep you know, all those who are listening into this session in your du'as, and those Muslims who are around the globe suffering, keep them in your du'as as well, inshallah ta'ala. We'll finish up with the dua. Maulana Imran, could I ask you to please perhaps finish up with the dua, please? Maulana Imran, are you there? No. Perhaps there's technical issue. Dr. Saiful, could I ask you to please finish up the dua, inshallah?
ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وادخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار. Oh Allah, accept our ibadat, accept our salah, accept our siyam. Make it easy for us in this coming month of Ramadan. Make it that we attain the taqwa that you have instructed us to attain. Make it that we prioritize Islam over all. And make it that we prioritize this deen over all. Allow us to be united under the one rightly true guided Khalifa. Ya Allah, give us unity in this dunya. Ya Allah, help the Muslims who are being oppressed all over the world. Ya Allah, there are too many to mention. Ya Allah, help the Muslims in East Turkmenistan, help the Muslims in Kashmir, Bosnia, Palestine, everywhere else. Ya Allah, help the Muslims in Bangladesh, Rohingya Muslims in Burma, the Pakistani Muslims. Ya Allah, help us all. Ya Allah, forgive us all our sins. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تباركت ذو الجلال والإكرام برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Jazakallah khair. Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.